What we know is our community loves the library.
The library spreads the love by adding this bus to its arsenal. And you're never too old to learn.
I think it's perfect, actually.
Seniors tackle cycling. Plus, multiple emergency response groups team up to work together.
Otherwise, we all work in our own silos.
And finally, find out what Iowa City's mayor is doing in Baghdad. And it all starts right now on this edition of Iowa City in Focus. The Iowa City Public Library is a point of pride in our community, but having just one location has limited its reach as the borders of our community continue to expand. The library recently came up with a creative solution to that tricky problem, one that should help expand its reach all over town.
The number one complaint about Iowa City Public Library is parking.
Downtown is the premier spot in Iowa City for many, but that's not the case for everyone. And as our city continues to grow, the library has made it a point to get out into the community more by creating events all across town.
So we hope that people will come and find us in the community.
The library has been looking at ways to expand, but adding another branch would be costly and would mean picking just one side of town. Instead, careful thought and consideration led to a different idea, a bookmobile.
It could go everywhere. It could go throughout the community. And, in our community, we didn't have to choose north, south, east, west. The bookmobile could go everywhere.
With support from the council, the library was able to bid out this custom-made bus. And while it was being built, the staff was busy training.
I haven't driven anything this large, mostly just a U-Haul once.
8 staff members were trained to operate the bookmobile, which included getting a chauffeur's license. The city's equipment division trained Kara first.
Then in turn, I started training all of the library staff people to drive that little dump truck because the bookmobile wasn't here yet.
It may not look much like the bookmobile, but there are similarities.
This type of vehicle I feel kind of comfortable with. I'm really anxious for the bookmobile to get here because it is much larger and longer than this, but it's the same type of chassis.
Angela and the other drivers didn't have to wait long. The bookmobile arrived on April 12th, just in the nick of time for the city's National Bookmobile Day celebration. The next step was to load the bus with books and other materials. The assembly line production was quite a sight to see. It should be noted that the 2,500 materials chosen for the bookmobile were carefully thought out. The items were picked based on data of who would be using the bookmobile most often. Research was used in pretty much every decision made during the planning process, including the schedule.
Places where we know that people are not using the library, and so we want to go into those neighborhoods and hopefully meet people who are not coming downtown to the library.
Kara and her staff used data to select the summer schedule, which runs from June 1st through August 18th.
What's a high visibility place where people are going to find us that has a lot of free parking?
And they will keep collecting data along the way, which will be used to create the next season's schedule and update materials on the bookmobile. The idea is to make it the best experience possible for those who don't get to the downtown library often.
The thought of taking the bookmobile out into the community, it's just more of those wonderful interactions, more of sharing the library with the community.
After 18 years with the library, that's still what keeps Kara excited about her work.
Those happy stories where somebody says, wow, the library really made a difference for me.
And it's these experiences that have fueled staff through the training process so they can hit the ground running in June.
And when you see the joy on people's faces and you know that the work, the planning resulted in the joy that you bring to somebody. It really, it's very rewarding, very rewarding.
It took several years of planning and hard work to get to this point, but the reward promises to be long-lasting.
So a lot of thought went into making sure that the bookmobile is comfortable, it has the technology it needs to serve the community, and it will be a vehicle that can serve our community for many, many years to come.
Two of my classes worked together to design the initial designs, and then we drew them out on stencils. They cut the stencils, and then 10 students came today to paint.
We're just being creative, we're being free.
If we put this stuff up, then I think it's like showing more creativity and stuff.
Well, they started off with realistic things outside of the tunnel, and then it gets more surrealistic, so dreamlike as you get into the tunnel.
We're painting a forest of these creatures that we made up.
Mushrooms, corn, monsters, a lot of different things. It gives us a chance to express our creativity.
The tunnel was kind of empty, and so we're kind of filling it up with art to bring like maybe a smile to someone's face.
It shows that we appreciate everything that the community does for our schools and everything.
The Senior Center offers hundreds of classes and programs each year, but for the first time ever, they've added a course that's encouraging people to get back on bikes again. Check it out.
Iowa City gets touted as a great place to retire, et cetera, and yet we aren't reaching out to older people to help them utilize the facilities here for bicycling.
Del Holland loves spending time at the Senior Center, and he also happens to love biking. While exercising with friends at the center, something crossed his mind.
I got to think, you know, maybe we could offer that as a class for some people who have ridden in the past but aren't riding now, but see it as something that they might like to do.
For Del, getting more people cycling is the goal, no matter what age. But he says seniors are great candidates for a couple of reasons.
If people keep more active, they're more healthy. And so, you know, that again fits into the Senior Center's philosophy.
The other is that biking can take a longer time depending on how far you're traveling. But if you're retired, who cares?
Senior population is a particularly important target, I think, because they have the time. So they can give up a little bit of time and not use fossil fuels.
He teamed up with his friend and cycling enthusiast Bob Opplinger to come up with the curriculum. They pitched it to the Senior Center, who immediately jumped on board. They set 4 dates in May to teach the class at the Iowa City Bike Library, where Del volunteers and serves on the board of directors. The class was open to anyone, so naturally they had students with all different levels of riding experience and concerns about cycling.
In that first class, we learned that a number of people had some mobility issues that might present some challenges to riding.
The curriculum was split into 2 parts, the first being bike care and maintenance. The class learned everything from checking your tire pressure to adjusting your handlebars, reintroducing people to the basics as most people hadn't ridden a bike in years.
I had a bicycle way back when in my 20s and did some halfway serious riding.
Harry and his wife Liz borrowed bikes from a friend a few years back.
We've always tried to stay physically active, and we thought this was certainly a very good exercise.
So they took the class hoping to add biking to their regiment. But entering the course, Harry still had doubts.
You know, I'm 70 years old now, and I'm not as young as I used to be, surprise. I've got some issues, I have some back issues, I got leg issues. So the question is, can I do it?
The second part of the class was riding.
We'll hold you. We got the bike.
Offering up different bike options and the support of more experienced riders, the group hit the trail at the Terry Trueblood Recreation Area.
I'm going to tip you to your left.
Okay.
And then you can put your foot down. Yep.
Okay.
Having several cyclists on hand to make sure bikes were fit properly made a big difference.
Being able to support people and say, yeah, here, we'll do it together, and away we go. And then them saying, oh my God, this is so much fun.
As for Harry, he rode over 6 miles that day.
I made about 3 circuits, and I really enjoyed it, but I felt it too that night and the next day.
Harry and Liz may rent bikes at first until they are sure they want to stick with it, which he seems determined to do.
It was worth it. I mean, and I'm learning, I'm getting an idea of whether I can get back into this, or how carefully I need to try to get back into it. I need something to keep me in motion. So, if I can bicycle, I think I should do it.
Del and Bob are collecting responses from participants to see how they like the class, but they agreed it seemed to be a success.
It's actually gone pretty well.
And hope to offer the course again. They may even offer an intermediate level in the future. Along with the Senior Center, Del also wanted to thank the local bike shops for collaborating in the project. And of course, the Iowa City Bike Library, who hosted the class.
By offering the space, but also just its existence allows people to think about bicycling in a different way, which is what we're hoping to do, get more people riding bicycles.
I threw my 1972 Humber Sport on the front, which is a big heavy bike, and hopped off and managed to get through the crowd and past Jim Throgmorton in the last 2 blocks. So I think the ability to have multi-mode transportation and the fact that all of our buses have bike carriers, that's great.
My biggest obstacle was the guy who won the race, Mike Haverkamp. So anyhow, I ran out of a little steam coming up Washington Street, and I had to walk the last third at the steep hill. That's what did it. Other than that, it was great.
It's fun to see the bus come in first, which is amazing. Also, we have transportation, great bus service here in Iowa City, lots of cooperation and coordination that goes with that.
When disaster strikes, we count on our emergency responders to know how to react. They fine-tune their disaster plans through realistic training. Several area agencies recently got together to do an exercise they've never practiced before, a mock plane crash here at the Iowa City Airport.
That's what you want to do, is learn any false planning assumptions during an exercise as opposed to during a real event.
The goals of disaster training are simple. Find out what from your response plan works well and what doesn't.
You're writing a plan based on a lot of assumptions, what you think is going to happen and how you think people are going to behave. And so to do any justice to that plan, you have to either have a real life event and then go back and look at that plan and say, how well do those two things match up, or you have to do an exercise.
That's exactly what brought nearly a dozen emergency response groups out to the Iowa City Airport. The scenario? A commuter airplane coming from Cedar Rapids crashes with 50 to 75 passengers on board. But before the drill begins, we need the victims in character. More than a dozen EMT students have been given specific injuries and conditions.
I'm not sure what's gonna happen. I'm just gonna be wandering around and kind of acting confused, but it's gonna be fun just seeing how everybody reacts in this kind of situation.
Impalements and amputations require generous amounts of fake blood. It turns out jelly is the best application for this. The victims are given specific actions and even dialogue to use during the response to make the situation as real as possible.
I was a diabetic, so I was running around kind of like a crazy man, so that was pretty fun.
This plane crash was severe enough to cause fatalities as well. Dummies fill this role. Once they are all in place and marked, the scene is nearly ready. The last touch, setting the plane on fire. No, not that one. This, a full-size van filled with hay, sits in for a real plane due to obvious reasons. Waiting for the call are firefighters, paramedics, and police, all aware of the drill, but not the details.
Honestly, have no idea what to expect.
To keep it spur of the moment, only a few higher-ups are privy to the specifics of the exercise.
We've heard rumors that we're all getting critical patients that we have to transport into the university, but other than that, I don't have any idea.
And then the call comes in. The Iowa City Fire Department are first on scene.
I have an aircraft that has crashed on the north-south runway. I have patients on the runway south of the aircraft. The aircraft is fully involved.
After scanning the situation, the firefighters quickly prioritize and communicate their concerns.
We were able to see the number of victims we had. We had another engine coming right behind us, and we knew an ambulance behind us to help with the victims. We concentrated on the fire in case any of the victims were covered in the fuel from the fire. We wanted to get the fire under control.
Make sure we have everybody accounted for.
Once the fire is under control, the scene is safe for paramedics to begin working. With so many victims, prioritizing who needs help first is crucial. The triage process is lifelike thanks to the committed role play by those acting as victims. Firefighters shift roles to help treat patients as well, getting them loaded onto ambulances as the urgency of their wounds requires. From there, the injured passengers were carted off to one of 3 area hospitals. The paramedics continued treatment while transporting the patients. At the hospitals, nurses and doctors had already set up emergency response areas after getting word of the plane crash. Here, the triage process continues as the medical teams decide who is a priority for treatment and potential surgery.
Help! Help! Help!
Meanwhile, back at the airport, the medical examiner's office is surveying the scene of the accident. Putting together a thorough report on a major disaster like this takes extreme attention to detail. It was interesting to watch as information was relayed from agency to agency. Working together is a huge reason for doing these mass response drills.
So it really gives us a chance to work with those partners and go, okay, this is how your training plans match up with our training plans. And we've got county-wide plans, and we need to make sure all those things fit together.
The individual groups I spoke with felt the same way.
The importance of doing drills with all the other agencies involved is invaluable. The teamwork working together.
Really, it's a chance for us to put our emergency plan in place and work with the agencies that would respond in a capacity if a real event were to happen.
The experience also left a big impact on the students who saw things from the patient's point of view.
As an EMT student, I didn't realize that maybe it would take a little longer for them to respond because you have to make sure the scene is safe and you have to make sure that everything is in line, so you're not putting yourself in danger.
It's kind of cool to see it all be put together, even though we talk about it all the time in
class.
Yeah,
we just read
seeing
about it.
Everything come together was kind of cool.
It was really interesting to see everybody work together and see how, because stuff like this doesn't happen all the time, so it's pretty interesting to watch it go down, how they work together.
My overall experience was pretty great, and I feel like they're ready for a real situation.
The final part of the exercise is an action review, a discussion where each department talks about the successes and failures of the response.
And then we'll identify any gaps in your training, equipment, or planning, and we'll go back and set an improvement plan and go back and fix those gaps so that next time when it's a real event, it's a little more smooth.
I heard the same thing over and over. Doing these training drills on a regular basis is invaluable. It helps wrinkle out issues in emergency plans so that when the real event takes place, the groups can work together to keep the people of Johnson County as safe as possible.
You know, nobody's ever been to the perfect response or the perfect disaster drill, but we try and make it as close to perfect as you can.
Iowa City's mayor was recently a guest at a special event held in Baghdad. The reason for the invitation begins at this old house turned office, now known as the Shamball House.
I got a surprise invitation by way of Chris Merrill at the International Writing Program.
With less than a month before the International Flower Festival was to be held, invitations were extended to mayors from select cities across the globe, including Iowa City.
Until only a few weeks before we went, the dates were still uncertain, so we had to scramble to get visas in time to make this happen.
Christopher Merrill, author and director of the International Writing Program, was the catalyst for the invite. For years, the IWP has hosted Iraqi writers as part of its residency program.
It's a place where books are taken really seriously.
And during his travels to lecture at universities in Baghdad, the teachers and students he encountered made a strong impression on Merrill.
What impressed me at every turn was the absolute commitment on the part of professors and students to the nobility of writing and of literature. That's something I think that we hold in common.
And it was in 2013 that another bond was formed. While visiting on behalf of the U.S. State Department, Merrill first began helping guide Baghdad towards its goal of becoming a UNESCO City of Literature, an achievement Iowa City reached just 5 years prior.
This was drawing on its long and illustrious history as an artistic and intellectual capital of the Arab world.
With help from Merrill and other cities of literature, Baghdad also earned the designation in 2015.
It's been a tremendous boon to Iraqi literature.
And it was through that connection that Mayor Jim Throgmorton was invited to the International Flower Festival.
They treated us with extraordinary warmth and generosity the whole time, and enabled us to see aspects of Baghdad that I think no tourist now would ever be able to see.
Along with attending the festival, Throgmorton met with Baghdad's mayor, the first female ever to be appointed to the position. He delivered a proclamation that emphasized the connection between the two cities. Other highlights of the trip included visiting bookshops, the beautiful displays for the festivals, and meeting many of the locals. Mayor Throgmorton told me the story of a young man they met whose dream is to come to the United States to become a jazz musician.
I or somebody said, "Can you play your sax for us?" He was so thrilled. It was so exciting for him.
Merrill sees a chance to build a relationship with this city in Iraq, a country that has been plagued by decades of revolution and war.
And I think we could imagine how Iowa City, a small city of literature, might interact with Baghdad, a large city, and in some fashion help to heal the wounds of a war.
And although most of their trip was quiet and safe, the two did experience a startling reminder of the violence that still takes place.
On the last night we were there, as we were driving back to our hotel, and right after Chris Merrill said, "You know, we could be driving on any major street in any city in the world," like 2 minutes later, there was this massive car bomb explosion to our left, maybe 500 meters away to the left. It killed maybe 3 or 4 security officers.
Still, Merrill says Baghdad is noticeably more vibrant than in his previous trips. He sees it as a sign of better days ahead.
Of course, you know, terrible things continue to happen, but while we were there, it was mostly quite safe. And that freedom of movement was, for me, the biggest change, the thing that made me think we are now in the end game on the way to a genuine and lasting peace.
Next time on Iowa City in Focus, learn about a new program that gives Iowa City kids a chance to earn a new bike of their own. And let us know what topics you would like to see covered in future shows. Email us at info@citychannel4.com or reach us on Facebook by liking the City of Iowa City government page. Have a great start to your summer. We'll see you next month on Iowa City in Focus.